Hey there, interweb. So unfortunately, I have to talk about something that really pisses me off, and that is the new guidance that the Biden administration sent out surrounding trans people in sports. And basically, it is a complete betrayal of the trans community, and it falls into a lot of anti-trans and right-wing talking points around trans people in sports. I won't go into the whole discourse and discussion around trans people in sports. I've already gone into a deeper discussion of the topic in this video that I'll put up on screen right here, as well as even more thoroughly and more recently in the first about 30 minutes or so of my video on Matt Walsh's What is a Woman that I'll link right here, and you can see the thumbnail for it right there. So you can go much deeper into this topic in that, and I'm just going to say two specific things about this guidance that really upsets me. One, the reason is that this is so upsetting is that trans people in sports is a topic that right-wing and anti-trans groups likes to use because it's one area in our society where assumptions about the superiority of men and our sort of separation of gender has become so ingrained that has been made invisible. The idea that men and women need to be separated in sports and no other basis can be used to separate people in sports or to qualify what is fair in sports is just an idea that has become so deeply ingrained in sports mentality that it's not something that people think about all that much, and they just sort of take it as a given. Where, as I discussed in those other videos, we can segregate on sports and talk about fairness in sports on many more lines than simply gender or, what genitals someone has, but upon weight class, upon, hormone levels, which, by the way, different people, even within genders, have different hormone levels, which is why you'll often see people of color be sort of excluded even from women's sports. For example, you see a lot of black women be excluded from women's sports on the basis of like estrogen or testosterone levels and things like that. And so it's just a talking point where this thing has become so ingrained that they can use trans people to end up reinforcing the sort of, assumptions that our society is based upon sort of through a gendered lens, and sort of create this continual fuel of like manhood is the way that we should be, this sort of male supremacy and white supremacist dialogue. And sports is just a place where they're able to do that, and they use transphobia to be able to fuel and feed that perception of this inherent difference between men and women that we have in our society. So it is really upsetting to see the Biden administration fall into, just that same exact rhetoric, and because it showcases how on that level these anti-trans talking points are persuasive to people even in more liberal-leaning spaces. And I say liberal-leaning, not left-leaning, even though they are more left-leaning than most. I still consider the Biden administration and all of like neoliberalism and the people that sort of prop up that system to be a very sort of like capitalist and anti-leftist, ideology and system. But before I get too far down that hole, the other point that I want to make that I think is a much clearer point that really upsets me is one of the things that the Biden administration cited as reasons for why they were putting through this guidance on trans people in sports was because on the basis that people might lose scholarships. Now, this is also based on a right-wing talking point, but it's one that deeply angers me because it underlies an implicit assumption, and I'll tell you what that assumption is. But let me start off by saying why this is a right-wing talking point. The right-wing talking point is that, when you allow trans women in sports to compete, then trans women may win at those sporting events, which, by the way, not all trans women always win sporting events, and that's a whole other discussion, but, they may win sporting events, and so, cisgender women may lose out on a scholarship to be able to go to college. Now, this is already playing off of the thing where why do we need to force people to compete with each other in sports events to be able to afford going to college in the first place? Education should be free. But even beyond that point, to talk about that as a talking point and saying people might lose scholarships, it underlines the implicit assumption that is baked into that trans people don't deserve scholarships. Because when trans people win a sports competition and they win a scholarship and are able to go to a college, that means trans people are thriving. Trans people are able to pay their own bills. And considering that trans people are often more unable to be able to pay bills, to be able to go to college because of stigma, because of the ways that we are not being able to access money in our society for many different reasons, like getting a job or support or things like that. And so to use that talking point showcases how little they care for trans people being able to have success within even the limits of their system, right? To say that people lose scholarships because trans women win sports implies that they don't view trans women as not only women, but as people. Because they don't say that they don't see or care that trans people would get those scholarships. No, the only people we care about are the cis girls who lose scholarships. And I should again say, I don't think anyone should have to rely on scholarships or competing to be able to go to college. I'm just pointing out the fact that by using that as a talking point, it showcases how little they care for trans people being able to find success when we are already discriminated against. And it just constantly reinforces that they are only willing to see trans people as a tool in a political culture war rather than caring about us on our own terms.
I didn't realize this when I was filming, but another thing that Biden's rules allow for are the use of physical exams to determine someone's gender, which would allow people to do genital inspections on children, which is already happening in some states, to determine whether they can participate in sports, which is traumatizing to everyone, not just trans people, and is gross and disgusting, and yet they claim that trans people are the ones who are groomers. It's honestly disgusting how obsessed with genitals people who are anti-trans often are.
And that's what deeply upsets me. It showcases that the people in the Biden administration, which I never expected them to, I'm not exactly here standing for the Biden administration. I've never been a fan of Biden at all, or this entire political, project that we have here in this country. But, they say they want to stand for trans rights, but they don't. They only use it as sort of a talking point and don't understand trans people at all. And it's honestly frustrating when they put out pieces like this that affect trans people's lives, especially trans youth's lives, without clearly understanding or doing the work or even thinking about trans people as people. And it's really fucked up.